Welcome back to the Incredible Hulk podcast. On today's podcast, we are talking bourbon. Why? Because I want to. And I've wanted to talk to our guest for a long time. From the channel Cinebourbon, Mike Yates is here, and we are going to get into all sorts of things when it comes to discovering, learning, tasting, and perhaps even making your own bourbon. And as I said, super excited to talk to our next guest. You might know him as Cinebourbon. Real name is Mike. My friend, it is an absolute honor to get to speak to you. So first of all, thank you for being here today.
Oh, no problem. Glad to be here. I'm honored to be here.
Well, I mean, the honor is all mine because I wanted to start here, and I do want to gotta get into the origin story of Cinebourbon, but I just want to say this straight up. Like, I'm never finding this bottle if you don't tell me to go drink it. Like, the first time I ever heard of Still Austin was you, and here in Michigan, we have the straight bourbon and the cask strength, and that is it. So anytime you're like, go get this one, I have to get in a car and go find in a different state because we don't have them. But I will tell you before we start, every single time you say, go find this one, I am in a car going to go do that. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, next time, just hit me up. We have it everywhere. So it's much easier.
Yeah, right. Well, the joke I always make is like, and I know you travel a ton, it's like here in Michigan, it's like impossible to find any Weller at all. And the joke I always make is like, in Ohio, it's like Diet Coke. You can find it everywhere. Yeah. Just go to Ohio and you'll get it anywhere. So let's start, Mike, at the beginning. How do you like... Does the bourbon hobby start first and then the filmmaking? I know you and I both love Peter McKinnon. Like, does the filmmaking come second? Like, how does this start? And, for me, I find you on TikTok first. Is that true, or were you elsewhere before then?
No, I was on TikTok first.
Okay.
The filmmaking hobby came first. I started making, like, dabbling around with cameras when I was like 15, 16 years old. I went to this crazy high school in Houston that had a broadcast journalism studio. And then we had this wrestling teacher that was like, I want to start a video production class. And in the early 2000s, that was like the most revolutionary thing somebody could say, right?
Yes.
So he was like, I'm going to get Apple to donate all these Macs. So we had the brand new Macs, the ones that were like, that had the different colors. They looked like the
IMAX, right?
Yeah. So we had those, and we had Final Cut Pro, and we had a bunch of cameras, and they were these like Canon, like broadcast level cameras that were shared between the broadcast journalism studio. And at the same time, I also had discovered Donald Glover.
Got it.
Like
this
college student.
Like if I might say, this is already the greatest origin story. I do a lot of interviews. This might be the greatest origin story ever. But keep going.
Like we discovered NYU version Donald Glover. Like this, like
yes,
his film projects. If you go on YouTube and search Derek Comedy, you will see him and a group of people. Some others you will recognize, like Erin from The Office. She was a part of, and they had these like very, very edgy, towed the line, like very vulgar videos that as a high school boy I just thought was so funny.
Right.
And so did my friends who were in this class. So we were like, well, we'll just do a similar thing. Like we'll figure out like what this idea of a sketch means, what it means to pull people in. So we were pulling in like teachers, other people. He had done this sketch where this guy was like so committed to hip hop that he had his hands surgically attached to his back, so he's always in b-boy stance. And we were like, let's like we played off of that, made up all these characters. So I was like always, from that point on, I was like the kid with the camera in his hand. And I just dabbled around with cameras. I thought like at one point I was going to go to Hollywood. Then there was this rumor that Hollywood was supposed to be moving to Austin. Like that was the thing. It was like, Sandra Bullock moved there. Elijah Wood lives there. Matthew McConaughey. Like, and they all do still live there.
Yes, right.
So my friends and I decided to go. I was like, I'm going to go to college. I'll go in the Austin area. I had two friends that were like, we're going to go do the movie star thing. Like, we're going to try. They were extras on Friday Night Lights with Michael B. Jordan and all that.
Yeah.
And our buddy that did not want to be an actor that drove us to Austin was the one that had the most success. He was written in as a character on Friday Night Lights.
That's
Dallas
hilarious.
Tinker. That's our friend LaMarcus.
That's fun. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just been cameras ever since then. And I started drinking bourbon a couple of years ago, just very casually, just like I was like, this is cool. This is like tasty stuff. Didn't know much about it. Had a good friend that I sort of grew up with in high school, met him in high school, who was really into it. That's Ray Ray. Everybody knows Ray
Yeah,
Ray,
yeah,
but he
yep.
doesn't create content anymore. Like I was just on FaceTime with him. He's actually picking up my newest Still Awesome bottle for me.
That's awesome. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but and I saw him and I was like, you know what? I'm stressed out from work. I need an escape. I want to figure out like how my camera can stop collecting dust. I had just sort of I had built this following in the education world,
Yep.
and I got very tired of that world. It's very plastic. It's like everybody's like, well, when I was at Brown University, I'm like, dog, I don't care. Like, what's the answer to the problem we're trying to
Yes. Yeah,
solve?
yeah,
You
yeah.
know? So I had built that brand as like the guy that will tell the truth in education at all times, and I was just tired of that. So then I just like, you know what? Let me turn the camera at the bottle of bourbon and see if this works out. And here we are.
And so that leads me to my next question, which is like, when do you decide that Mike comes on camera? Because I started watching. I think I probably saw the first video soon after you posted it and was digging the kind of trailer vibe. And you're using the TikTok voice and doing all that stuff. But at some point, there's a decision, and then I'm like, oh, there's a real that's a person. Because obviously, when you're using the TikTok voice, you could be a goat with a camera. Like I have no idea who is making the content, and then I'm like, oh, there's a human. What was that? What was that?
I discovered two things in this journey. One of them was that I didn't know how much the whiskey world was about authenticity. And so a couple of things happened. One, people started to try to like knock that style off.
Sure.
Like people, like the copycats will always come. People were very kind and generous who like sort of like knew they were like, you're stealing this guy's thing. And I was like, well, I don't own this voice. My day job, like I get to work in AI.
Right.
But
Right.
You know, I found it before a lot of people, but I don't own this voice. And then I had a brand send me something, and for the first time, and it was like super. I think I might have had like 1,200 followers. It was like super early in the journey, and they said, "Hey, like the note was. It literally said, without knowing what you look like." They basically said they were kind of nervous to send it, and I was like, "Oh, okay." So I just decided, I was like, I've done initially the like not showing my face on camera using the AI voice was this creative challenge that I gave myself because I had never done anything anonymously on the internet. Everything I had always done was very Gary Vaynerchuk inspired.
Sure.
Like,
Yep.
like, you know, you are your brand all the time. And I was like, well, let me try a different way. Like, it wasn't because like I was hiding my face from my employer. Like everybody knew, like I'm also pretty senior in my role, so I don't have to hide my face.
Yeah. Yep.
So it was just the challenge of like, if I can't just talk to the camera, what would I do? And I actually think that those early days of like the Cinebourbon account I actually now am able to look back on them a year later and go, I kind of miss that. Like I'll probably go back to that at some point because it was a fun creative challenge.
And I often say in that work, when you're doing anything creative, like if you want to make really fun stuff, give yourself guardrails. Because if you just go, we can do anything, you'll do nothing. But if you go, I can't show my face, has to be 15 seconds and has to whatever, you'll find that you get super creative super quick.
100%. Yep, 100%.
And I don't know that I would like. I enjoy, and obviously TikTok seems to enjoy. Like your storytelling is next level, given with your pedigree in AI and education. So I enjoy that stuff where you guys are digging into the stories of bourbon. You know I don't know what you call the group of you. Do you guys have a name for the boy band that does all the bourbon?
I keep telling them we need a name.
You absolutely need a name because I'm always like, anytime I tell a buddy that I've watched something other than you, I'm like, he's with Mike. He's one of, I don't know what they're like the Avengers with bourbon, but they don't call themselves the Avengers. So
yeah, it's funny. My best friend, who I also met in high school, we now live 2 miles down the road from each other. So he is the one that makes appearances in the videos now. His handle on TikTok is Bourbon Bandit.
He's the one that you guys are doing. You guys do the hunting videos together, right? That's him. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. That's him. Yep. So he and I have formed something called Cast Strength Studios because we're trying to sort of force a name over this blanket of people.
Yes.
And I don't think people yet see, it's not like nobody's like flat out refused. And I've only like softly thrown the suggestion out, but we have a group text. That all started when we all went to Kentucky together. And I still don't think everybody in that group fully internalizes how much people relate us with each other now because of all the videos that came out during that like month
Yes,
span.
and I want to get to that in a second, but keep going.
We're just us, Brett and Ray and I, we've all known each other half our lives. So we're trying to start something called Castring Studios, which is just a collective of people that care about how their content looks in the bourbon world. And like, we're not trying to do anything other than like have the hobby pay for itself.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yep. I absolutely get that. So I want to talk about that Kentucky trip because I think as a consumer of yours, I think there's two ways to look at what you were doing as a collective. It's like, oh man, how did they get to do all that cool stuff? But I was looking at that and watching each one of you, at least non-verbally, responding in this way that I'm going to guess you might not have fully kind of unpacked what magic was happening with you in that group at that time. So can you take us back a couple steps to like, how does that happen that all of you get to go all at once? And what was that like? I mean, like, Freddie aside, and I'd love to talk all about, but like all of that stuff, what was that like?
Yeah, I'll tell. So there's a couple cool stories in this. The first thing, because we're both like everybody who is like really into the videography. We're both Peter McKinnon fans. So
yes. Yeah.
I realized one thing, and this is sort of like where Castring Studios is coming from too. I realized that it's not just Peter McKinnon. It's all the Canadian YouTubers. Like they have figured out how to location hack in a way that's like, like they'll all go to freaking, I don't know, Lake Como in Italy, and like 9 videos come out about it. So we were having a discussion on live actually at one point. It was like Shiloh, who's he does the raffles on TikTok. Kevin, which everybody knows on TikTok, Bourbon Notes, and we're all on live, and somebody asked the question in the comments, like, do you think distilleries care about content creators? Immediately Kevin's like, no. But Shiloh and I were like, well, we're like, I don't know, dude. Like maybe not Buffalo Trace, but there are distilleries that we know care about content creators. It's not like we're never gonna make or break a brand. Like that's not
no.
Thing. But there are distilleries that like are more than happy to open their doors. One of the greatest examples is Still Austin. They have never cared what the follower count says on any of my accounts. They're just like, this dude loves our whiskey. He makes fun videos. He's fun to be around, and they give me all sorts of access, barrel picks, all kinds of stuff. So we had that discussion. It was sort of like buzzing around in our brains. And Kevin didn't do this intentionally, but he won the Sazerac lottery.
Okay.
And which is like unheard of. And he chose a Weller Full Proof, and then he was like, all right, well, how do I make the trip epic? So the answer to a lot of people's questions about how does that Kentucky trip get put together, most of it is Kevin. It is him. He is military, so he like I wish we would have posted the schedule that he made. It was like, we're waking up at this time, we're having a large breakfast, we're in the van by this time, driving to and I was like, look, I'm terrible at schedules, so I'm just gonna follow this guy's schedule. And it was fantastic. But he lined it up. But what I think we all saw start to happen during the week is, we went to a bunch of we went to Rabbit Hole, Buffalo Trace, Pursuit, Old Forester, and Michter's. And some of them went to Darts before. And what we saw is people that we were kind of like fans of were also kind of in the opposite direction, like coming dressed up, like making sure they were, Michter's was the one that really got us because Andrea Wilson was there, and then Dan McKee walks in.
Wow.
And he says, oh, is this where the stars are? And we're like, dude, you're the star. What are you talking about? It was great. I mean, they gave the way they rolled out the red carpet for us. But the real moment that's worth talking about is on Whiskey Row. This is where I realized that like the threshold for what it means to be I don't like the term influencer, but like an influencer in
Yep.
the bourbon world is much lower than everywhere else. I don't remember how many followers I had at the time. I think it might have been like 3 or 4,000. And we're hustling from Michter's to Old Forester, which is on Whiskey Row, so you can just walk. But it's like basically a mile and a half. Like it felt like a mile and a half. So instead of taking Ubers, we're walking. And this guy's like, I'm on live, just like messing around. And this guy's like, "Hey, Cinebourbon, is that you?" And I turn around and I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh, you're with Shiloh and Wayne." And he's like, "I watch all of y'all's content. I love your stuff." And then some other guys are like, "Yeah, me too, bro." Like just walking by. And we're like, "Oh, this is cool." And so it wasn't like a celebrity moment. It really felt like a community moment. It's like, "Oh, this niche is really small in a really nice way." And so I think like I don't know if the group is fully internalized that we could easily give ourselves a name and probably do 30 barrels
Right.
every year. But on some level, people get it.
Let's talk about that for a second, because I think, you sort of hit on a couple key things when people are talking about content creation or whatever niche they're into, if it's collectible toys or
Yeah.
dogs or whatever, right?
Yeah.
They think that there's some sort of magic number, but here you are, like you said, you're just over a year on TikTok creating content. You're what, a year and 3 months at this point, I think, if we're doing some quick math. And you're already, like you said, you're doing barrel picks. You guys are selling stuff on Silvac. Like, you're everywhere. And so for somebody who's starting out, right? Like, you told this great story, and I promise there's a point to the story, but you told this great story about this bottle, right? And you said, like, that was the very first time you could pick up any notes that you were like, "Oh my God, I understand the Rubik's Cube right now," right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What happens from this moment where you're like, "I got the Rubik's Cube," to then you're doing barrel picks? What is that journey like? And are you nervous what's the first time like? I've never done anything like a barrel pick, so I'm fascinated to go from I sort of taste mascarpone, but I'm not even sure what mascarpone is, to let me tell you what my barrel is.
Yeah. So I fell in love with coffee years ago.
Yep.
I went to Colombia and spent some time there, like South America, and living on the side of the Andes Mountains where you get to drink what I think is the second best coffee in the world, because I think Ethiopia is the best. And learning from people that like learning to taste coffee with a language barrier was really interesting for me.
Oh yeah.
Because
okay. Yeah.
the only common thing that we had was fruits or chocolate, right? So I went through this coffee tasting experience in Colombia where they gave me a piece of chocolate and they gave me coffee and they were like, "Find the note in the coffee." So I had that skill of like picking out flavor notes. I just didn't, I had to get over the ethanol. And once I got over the ethanol from whiskey, like, I would always dump something in it, like Jack and Coke or whatever. But once I started drinking whiskey neat and I got over the ethanol, I was like, "Oh, this is just like coffee. This is the same thing." So that experience helped me out. Heaven Hill Bottled and Bond, like once I got the same note as somebody who I knew a lot about whiskey, I was like, "Okay, I think I'm turning the corner." And then I just ended up falling into these really cool experiences. I met there's a distillery in Dallas called Roxer. Well, I guess the distillery is called New Artisan Distillery, but they make this product called Roxer. Roxer is a botanical bourbon. It is not popular in the bourbon world.
It's a what? What's a botanical bourbon?
So what they do is so this guy Don, he used to be the CEO of Coca-Cola for the eastern region of the world, and then he retires and he starts making gin. And when you make gin, you use botanicals. You basically steep botanicals in the. So he was like, "Well, what would happen if I sourced really good bourbon from MGP, and I just left the botanicals in the barrel with the bourbon?" And he hires this James Beard Award-winning chef, and they start making this bourbon. It's fantastic for cocktails. Like, it's not something that I'm sipping neat often, but it's when I want something unique and different, I'll reach for it. They don't care about, like, listening to them say we don't care what bourbon enthusiasts want. This is what we think is cool. Like I was like, that's awesome. And then they also have like, 10-gallon water bottles where they're making their own experiments. But being there, they give you this interesting tasting experience where you're actually you're nosing and you're tasting spices alongside spirits, and that
Oh, okay.
also
Yeah.
helped me. That was the literal bridge between like I think I got it with this coffee thing, but it was like no, I completely understand. It also gave me a range of spices and tastes and flavors to talk about. So I just from the coffee experience and then that experience with Roxer in Dallas, I then had the language to start communicating, and that helped me a lot on social media. So I think that happened, and then how I start going on barrel picks is interesting. I mean, to be honest, like it helps to have a giant professional camera. Like,
Yes, yeah, no, I get. I do a lot of that work too, so I get that you can get into a lot of places with if you put a microphone on top of anything, they're like, yeah, come on in.
right. And so I had this great bourbon club, and when I lived in Dallas, the Plano Whiskey Society, and they had a pick. I was aggressively looking to do one because I wanted to get my horror story out of the way. I knew that at some point I would pick a terrible barrel.
Okay, got it. Yeah. So like this is like the brisket version of barbecue, right? Your first brisket is going to be awful, so cook it, get it out of the way, and like move on with your education.
Yes. I will try to spare the store, but my first barrel pick, no, I don't need to spare the store because they know the first barrel pick that I did was so bad that the owner of the store didn't end up buying the barrel. He just ate the cost. That's how bad it was. We did the distillery, I won't say, but it is the same distillery that produced Dennis Rodman's bourbon.
Got it.
And we did a triple blend of wine finished bourbon, and it was perfumey and nasty. It like we picked it. It felt like I think this is I think we got the right blend. They do this thing where they bring in samples and you make the blend, and I am so glad that no one has ever tasted it. I'm so glad it's never come out because it was rough. And I'm glad I had that experience because it helped me know what not to do on barrel picks. It helped me understand like having the conversation with the liquor store owner where he was like, look, when you pick barrels, you basically have two options. Like you pick one that is unique to your store and that your crowd's going to buy, or you pick one that everyone's palate's going to like and that is very similar to that taste profile. And so I think that's just it. Like I've been exceptionally curious about everything. Like when I get into something, I go really deep. And so whether it's me like DMing the Bourbon Pursuit guys or DMing like Ed Bly from Rising Tide Spirits. He makes Old Stubborn.
Yep.
He has been the most helpful person in the whiskey world to me by answering any and every question I have, like very thoroughly through DMs about wood sugars, blending, like everything. So I've just been a sponge, like soaking this world up. And then the truth is like the way that I have been able to go on a lot of barrel picks is from being friends with Kevin. Kevin gets a lot of barrel picks. Like as a matter of fact, like right now, I have a text from him right now about, hey, you want to come on a Bowman Brothers pick? Like, right there. So it's that. Then the Still Austin ones came because those were my barrels, so I organized those, and it was just because I love Still Austin, and they were nice enough to love me back.
So Mike, let's zoom that out a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things I'm aiming to do is like create content that kind of invites people in that don't know, they know they like bourbon, but they don't, they want to get better at it. Like the example I'll give is my next door neighbor went on a trip to Kentucky. He came back with all of his picks that he liked, and he had me over and he showed me the ones that he liked, and we shared a couple pours together. And I thought to myself, like, this is it. This is why you do this, is because this human being loves these 4 bottles and he wants to share them with me. How do you build a community around that? to back up a couple steps, as you probably know, when you bump into people who are new at this, they're like sweet, spicy, hot, not hot. And so could you give me maybe like, you know, because you're an educator at heart, like if somebody's in that space where they don't have any idea how to pull vanilla or caramel, which are like kind of the easier ones to find, out, does the spice trickle? Like, what would you tell that person if they want to go deeper than hot, not hot?
Oh yeah, there's a couple things. One of them is there's two things to do. One is to drink every night for at least 2 weeks. And you don't have to drink a lot. You can pour quarter ounce, half ounce, but get yourself over the ethanol. Like if you can't get over the ethanol, you'll never get anything. My wife, by way of story, has been on this really interesting journey in that like I now have so much bourbon that
you don't say.
Right. It's like no matter where I am in my house, there's just like bourbon all around. Like on my desk, I have bourbon all around me. And it's just like, but there's so much. She started to like, she used to love wine and she still likes wine, but she's starting to gravitate towards whiskey in this really interesting way where she was like, I can't get over the ethanol. I'm putting lemonade in it. And I was like, well, we're going to give you a real test. I have a bottle of bourbon that was gifted to me from a brand that I do not like. And it is finished in Amberana. And I was like, you can just dump as much lemonade. And she was like, I didn't tell her what it was. She's like, I don't like this. This is perfumey. It tastes like medicine on the back end. And I was like, whoa. Like even with the lemonade, she's starting to pull out. So one of the things that I would recommend, which is thing number 2, is I wouldn't recommend diluting it in the way that a lot of people, like not the water droplet. I think that sometimes that actually intensifies the heat of a bourbon. There's this thing that we learned from Freddie at Buffalo Trace actually, and it mimics what people do in spirits competitions. In spirits competitions, they will often proof whiskeys down to like 40 proof. But if you take a small sip of water and then you sip the bourbon, you will be shocked at how many more notes that you pull out. There are all these other little quirky tricks. Like if you put a little bit of whiskey in your hand and you rub it together and you literally slap your hands together, you'll be able to smell like bread, corn, things like that. But I think it's just a matter of like getting over the ethanol and then getting yourself familiar enough with like the classic bourbon notes and then other things that you smell or remember. The last thing I would say actually is to not be afraid to give weird tasting notes. I used to be afraid to like say something wrong, but there actually isn't a wrong answer. The greatest example of this is Dee Jones from Sealbox. She makes these reviews and will say things like, I get fresh cracked leather, or she'll say like cherry skins, like blistered cherry skins. And at the end of nobody is ever in the comments like, girl, you don't get that.
Right.
But like there are some times where I'm like, impossible. Like there's no way. But I haven't asked her why she does this, but I think the reason why she does it that way is because she's like almost subconsciously teaching people that like this is my experience with the whiskey. And as soon as a person understands that this is my experience with the whiskey and like my tasting notes that I give, I'm only giving them out loud because I'm telling others what my experience with that whiskey is in case yours may be similar or in case that sounds delicious to you, because that's what any tasting note is. Like with that bottle of Still Austin, there's actually a video right now that Still Austin has where Jason Harry, who's their head of education, he's like saying out loud, okay, so I think for these tasting notes, we're going to call it creme brulee and this and that. Like that's all anybody's doing. So I think like if people can get over the fear and just put what they taste out there, get over the ethanol, get over the fear.
All right, Mike, in the last couple minutes that we have left, I want to kind of you to put on your like future casting hat, you know, because you're you and the group is also going through this transition where tequila has found its way into the group, right?
Yes.
And I say that not to poke fun, but because you're seeing the same thing happen in the consumer segment. Consumers are now looking for high-end tequila. You guys were just a little bit ahead of that curve. And so that's why I want to pick your brain and go, okay, what does 2025 look like? And if people are kind of interested in the spirits world, what should they be thinking about as we leave 24 and head into 25?
Ooh, that's such a great question. By the way, yeah, like I just will say on this podcast, Wayne, Drink with Wayne is responsible for the tequila.
I'm aware. I am aware.
Yeah, I have a bottle of tequila right here. So I think in 2025, it's so funny. I don't have a great answer. But I do know that I think there will be less wine finishes in 2025. I think 2025 is going to be the year of wood finishing. Like it's going to be somebody's probably going to do a Chinkapin oak. Somebody's going to do a Hungarian oak. I know for a fact Bowman Brothers is doing a Hungarian oak. We were there. They would not tell us, but they have these giant Hungarian, so yeah. I think the wine finishes are going to die down a little bit. Like we won't see as much sherry or sauternes or whatever. Like it's like, I find it funny that there's all these brands that are like, they're finding new ways or new words to call sherry, like an Apera cask. That's just Australian sherry. Right. So, but I think the wine finishing craze will die down. And I think you'll see a lot of interesting oak projects. Like I said, I think double oaking is having its day right now. And I think it might explode in 25. But I think I really think that's it. Like I don't know. I will think about this some more.
Could I ask a quick follow-up though? You go kind of opposite my taste profile. Like you seem to really love hazmat, seems to be your jam. Like anything that's like 250% alcohol or higher is like your jam. Do you get the sense that might pick a direction, right? Because right now in the market, you go into most stores, you've got a kind of, there are some hazmats, there's some 120s, and then there's, your 80 to 104. I'm wondering, do you think if we're getting back to, I'll put a word that you didn't say, but like if we're getting back to more like the basics or the origin story of bourbon, do you think the proofs will come down? Proofs will go up? Any sense, or it'll just stay the way it is?
I think there may be a trend in proofs going down a little bit, like because hazmats are getting more expensive. Like people, distilleries are saying like, there's rationale to charge you $200 for a bottle of hazmat.
Sure.
Like, I also think that I think the money proof in the future is 108, like one more than 107, right? But it's like that.
Yep.
It's that 110 to like 106. Like I don't know where I took it upstairs. The Bardstown, they just released their wheated origin series, their high wheat origin series, and I think it's 106. I have a sample of it, and it's incredible at 106. Like it's amazing when you think about that, and you think about like obviously like Weller 107. You think about the Pursuit series where everything's 108. Like I think that proof is there's something magical about it, because as the market has grown larger, so the skew of people is larger. I think there are more people in that category that are ready to like step their game up from 90, but they're also like 120s gasoline. So certainly not buying, But I do think ultimately you'll see proofs go down, because when you see these new whiskeys hit the market, like Beyonce's whiskey, it's like 88 proof. I found out there's another celebrity. Wait, when is this? Is this getting released soon?
It'll be released in an hour. So
okay, yeah.
So don't spoil it if you're not supposed to say it.
Like I'm respecting a lot of brands that will come into the market at 98 or 99. Like Frank August, their small batch is 100 proof. Like so I do think you'll see things come down. The whiskey geeks like me, like we will always want the really crazy, unique stuff. Like, but you know what I want? Actually, I am chasing a single barrel whiskey where the proof has gone down from the barrel entry proof.
Okay, I like
That's
it.
one of the only things I don't have, right? Like I want something like that too. So yeah, like I'm with you. I do think you'll see the proofs come down.
All right, my friend. Thank you so much for the time that you've given us. It was a blast for me. I hope this was fun for you. And
Yes.
if people want to follow you, is TikTok the best place to do that, or are you
Yeah.
starting other channels? Just TikTok.
TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Cinebourbon at all of them. I am once I get my TikTok to 10,000, I'm gonna really dig into YouTube. So those,
Can we expect a 2 hour documentary from you at any time in the future?
I don't know about 2 hours, but I am like so going forward, every barrel pick that I do that I am like personally leading will have a QR code on the tater sticker, and it will lead to like a documentary style video of
I
like
love
what it
this.
was like to pick that barrel.
Yeah, this has been a blast, my friend. Thank you so much for the time.
Hey, thank you, man. You're an amazing host.
I will take that all day.